What's the trashiest thing you've ever witnessed? Story 1. When I was 9 years old, I had a good friend who lived in a home that was extremely chaotic. My parents would never let me stay overnight there. Yet for some reason, my mom agreed this one time. Big mistake. My friend fell asleep while we watched a movie in the living room with her year-old brother who already had a missing front tooth. A little later, he whispered, "Hey, look." I turned and saw something inappropriate he had exposed. Grinning like it was funny, he started insisting I should do something I absolutely did not want to do until I told him I would wake his sister and tell her. So he stopped. When the movie ended, I woke her and said we should go to bed. We went upstairs, and thankfully his room was downstairs. Her parents had old newspapers spread out on the floor in the corner with a metal coffee can sitting there. I did not ask why. I woke up in the night needing to use the bathroom. So I went downstairs. Halfway down, I saw her mom on the couch and her dad standing there in a compromising position. The mom looked at me, whispered something, and the dad spun around startled. He pulled himself together fast and yelled, "Get upstairs." I said I needed the bathroom. He shouted, "That is what the coffee can is for." I ran to the bathroom anyway, turned on the light, watched bugs scatter, and hurried. Then I ran back upstairs and stayed awake all night. In the morning, I used the kitchen phone to call my mom to get me as soon as possible, watching my friend's mom dilute a half full gallon of milk with water until it reached the top. Story 2. I foolishly bought my girlfriend at the time tickets to see Britney Spears in Newark with Pussycat Dolls as the opening act. This was about years ago. She was a terrible driver and did not have many friends. So she asked me to go so she would have a ride in company. I agreed. Everything was fine. And I had earplugs and they sold beer, so no big deal. During a bathroom break, being one of maybe guys in the whole arena, there was no line for me. When I walked in, I saw groups of very young concert goers everywhere using fixtures in ways they absolutely should not have been using. They looked up at me, smirked, and continued. I immediately stepped out and asked a staff member if I could use a different restroom, and they allowed it. Now I have the lifelong memory of accidentally witnessing dozens of underage fans in a chaotic state in the men's room at a Britney Spears concert. Story 3. I may have shared this on an old account if it sounds familiar. When my mother joined a group for single professional moms. She met the organizers and was invited to an event the next evening, which was a screening of First Wives Club at a historic theater. They arranged for local firefighters to volunteer as ushers, greeting each attendee with a rose and a glass of champagne before escorting her to her seat. But you wanted trashy, not classy, so here it comes. My mother did not drive, so I dropped her off and promised to return in 2 hours. Minutes later, I was back with my little brother, seeing a crowd of police and bystanders. My mom had called earlier, saying there had been an incident and to come get her. This was before cell phones were common, so we approached an amused officer who escorted us inside. We saw a dozen well-dressed, but disheveled and extremely intoxicated middle-aged women in cuffs alongside very frustrated and rumpled firefighters. Apparently, several attendees had overindulged in the free champagne and playfully pressured the firefighters to demonstrate their gear changes, which escalated into them trying to undress the men further. While Diane Keaton was yelling on the screen, these highly intoxicated moms became overly handsy. That is when the police were called. According to the officer, when they arrived, the lobby was complete chaos. Shoes kicked off, hair messy, uniforms pulled on, scratched or torn. The firefighters were trained for emergencies, but not this kind of scenario. My officer escort pulled my mom out of side office where she had been hiding with others, and we left. For years afterward, if my mom scolded me, I reminded her of the time I had to bring my 7-year-old brother to rescue her from a drunken disaster at a theater event. Story 4. When I was a preteen, I ate some bad food at a restaurant. We went to Target afterward, and my stomach turned instantly the moment we walked in. I went to the bathroom, used it, and 5 minutes later needed to go again. I decided to just stay there until everything settled. It got so repetitive that I told my parents to go visit the other stores and call me when done. About minutes later, I heard people come in. I thought, great, they will definitely hear this and smell this. Then I saw 3 pairs of feet enter the stall beside me, one belonging to a woman and 2 to men. These very questionable individuals proceeded to have an explicit encounter in the Target bathroom while I was dealing with my horrible stomach situation only a few feet away with just a stall wall between us. I only saw their feet, but it absolutely counts as something I experienced. Story 5. At a college party in an apartment, a very attractive girl dressed in Daisy Dukes and a halter top, maybe 5 feet tall, showed up. She drank, yelled something wild, and quickly connected with one guy before pulling him into a bedroom. 20 minutes later, he came out smiling. Nothing unusual so far. Then from the bedroom, she called out again for someone else. Everyone looked at each other. No one moved. She came to the doorway, completely undressed, pointed to another guy, and he went. This continued with multiple people. After a while, she did not even fully close the door, and by the end, she walked out wearing her original outfit, but clearly not cleaned up, grabbed a cup of punch, and left. We later found out she was a local from town and had done similar things before. Story 6 went to a wedding in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. Great wedding at a golf course, but the reception ended at so we went to one of the local bars that we were at the previous night to frame the story. I am in a car with 3 other friends of mine. The 4 of us are all wearing the typical post-wedding attire. Dress pants and dress shirts, but with the sleeves rolled up, no ties, and untucked shirt. Kind of how you get towards the end of a wedding reception. The bar itself was definitely a small country town bar. So we pull up to a bar called the Bear Moose and that sat on the side of a country road. As we pull in, my headlights beam directly on a lovely young couple, being extremely intimate. This girl was bottomless with only one of her legs inside of her jeans moving on top of the guy. They were doing it right on top of one of those gritty, crushed rock parking lots. No attempt to get privacy or, at least not be directly in line with where people pull into the parking lot. We then all walked inside, waiting for our other friend to show up. I immediately realized that we did not fit in given our attire. It is the first time in my life where the types of people to act openly in a bar parking lot fit in more at a place than I did. Story 7. I'm a paramedic and we get called for an active maternity call. As we pull up, there are 4 cops outside absolutely losing their minds, which is normally a sign that there is something chaotic going on inside, because normally visions of press releases, medals and sugar plums, dancing cops' heads at maternity calls. We go inside to find a 5th cop, a female staring in mute horror. The mother is standing there with a baby on the ground, not breathing, umbilical cord still attached. A glass pipe is in her hand, still smoking. As we walk up, the placenta falls out, which for anyone who knows is a sign that this is not her first, second, or third rodeo. We found out later that this was kid number 7 with father number 5. My team goes to work on the baby. The other crew goes to work on mom. Turns out mom had been using hard substances all night, and when the baby fell out of her, thought nothing of the fact that it was blue. Then this conversation happened. Isn't my baby beautiful? He is that color because his father is black. My partner, who is a legendary smartass, responded with, honey, unless his father is a smurf, he is not supposed to be that color. So we work the kid up, get the kid ventilated, get 4 access, and the kid rapidly improves. We get the kid out to my bus and get him packaged. My partner goes back in to get the placenta and then has to fight the woman's giant pet rabbit for it. The kid did fine and was placed in a foster care. Story 9. My car was rear-ended by a driver who I guess was not paying attention while I was at a red light, pushing my car into the car in front of me. Now, let us just let that sink in. My car's rear end was totally demolished, and the front of my car collided with another vehicle. When the police came, suddenly the 3 people in the front car all had horrible whiplash and needed to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. All while I watched standing straight up from the side of the road, telling the cops what happened. Apparently, the at-fault car tried to get an appeal, and I was summoned to court with the 3 other people in the front car. I was well-dressed and got there early. The 3 of them showed up in casual clothes, miraculously having been totally healed from their neck trauma, and just commenting and giving there. Disapproval remarks aloud. While the at-fault guy was talking with the judge, I guess they did not recognize I was also involved since I was the only one who lost my car that day sitting right beside them. Oh, and I also noticed that they changed the name of the driver at the time to the guy in the back seat at the time. They probably claimed a huge amount of disability payment from that mess. Meanwhile, I lost my car. It is amazing how grubby some people can be. Story. When I was a boot in the Marines, me and a few buddies got a hotel room in San Diego so we could party all weekend off base. Me and my one buddy went out while the other two stayed in the room and said they would meet us later. They never met us, but we had a great time. When we got back to the room, we opened the door to see the other two Marines involved in an intimate situation with a very large woman who had no natural teeth. She had one of those retainer mouthpieces with fake teeth sitting in the dresser next to the bed. It was very obvious that they got a worker from Craigslist. One of them was very embarrassed and quickly ran to the bathroom. The other said, "You fellas won in," while still going. And the toothless woman smiled at us and tried to wave us in to join. I just walked out, closed the door, and got in a cab back to base. Bonus. A few days later at work, I confronted the two Marines about the incident and asked if they at least used condoms. They both said no, but added that it is fine as long as you wash your privates with Listerine afterwards because it kills % of germs. Story. I was driving one day, slow crawling city traffic, warm with summer sun, so the windows were down. Radio din was up, but while at a stoplight, I could hear an argument brewing between a man and woman at a bus stop 2 lanes over. I turned the volume down. I hate that I was interested in what the entanglement was about. No other car is at the light with me. The woman had a daughter, maybe of 5 years or so. The child sat opposite into the bus stop bench, mom at the nearer end to the standing and pacing man. From muted and muffled voices through city sounds, I could tell they were some sort of couple. She was pregnant, perhaps with his. He dressed like he was the street version of Vanilla Ice. With a straight-brimmed Lakers cap cocked to the PM side of his forehead, a Clippers oversized jersey, full-sleeve tats. She was dressed more casually, almost a sad, casual pornist to it. Shorts, a white frilly top that lost its frill over time, but it was what she had. She looked sad, like she had been in this argument or in this position many times with this man who was lecturing and berating and screaming, and she knew her participation was pointless. Green light any second, while I was also wondering the stories of each of them. How did they get here? Why did he choose her? Why she him? As the light turned green, the woman stood to address her child at the opposite end of the bench. Frustrated, she aimed some venting to her little girl, who I could not see. As the car started to move, I'm still watching, still listening to him verbally crush her to the pavement. As I start to accelerate, hoping this could correct itself before they get on the upcoming bus, I see from the corner of my eye a blur of motion from him to her, and a resulting sound to this day I will never forget. The heavy, meaty thud of a punch to her face and her gasping moan. I saw her stumble and fall, the man continuing to yell at her. By now my car is in motion, and before I know it, I am past the intersection, still comprehending what I had just witnessed. I felt her trauma, saw her innocence fall to the sidewalk in some tablespoons of blood. After that, I could only imagine. I did nothing else about it. I did not call anyone. I did not do anything. I have lived with this for about 7 years now. It never goes away. I drive by that same bus stop once a month, perhaps. I still see the shadows of that day on the fading advertisements. My lack of action that day, to help someone very much in need, is the trashiest thing I have ever witnessed. Story. I visited distant relatives in Mississippi with my grandpa, and one night one of my second cousins was angry that their older sister was using her bikini top. The fight got heated, and the older sister ripped off the bikini top and threw it at her sister. The older one, with her chest fully exposed to the whole family, then tried to fight the younger one, and their elderly mother got in between them. But that did not stop them. My grandpa, a minister, got the older shirtless lady in a headlock and threw her out. The next morning, I wake up to a man yelling around the house, looking for my grandpa, talking about how he was going to kill him for what he did. That was the first and last time I visited that side of the family. Story. I went to a party in high school with people I knew had a few screws loose. I arrived maybe an hour in, and one guy is extremely drunk, stumbling up to each girl there, and essentially falling on them while attempting to make out with them. He does this maybe 4 to 5 times a minute. The girls are all into it, by the way. Each one only stops when their friends tell them to. Finally, this dude decides to tackle the host of the party. It is her birthday party, and starts making out with her. This makes another guy there angry because he likes the host, so he proceeds to get upset and punch a hole in the wall. They all collectively and drunkenly decide to fix the hole by getting a tack and a cowboy hat and hanging the hat over the hole. I had not been to a party in high school before this point, so my plan had been to smoke and drink a bit and just enjoy whatever went down, but I was not really sure what to do about all this, so I ended up just chilling on a half wall in the midst of everything. Somewhere in the time that the dude punched the wall, the host had gone to her room with the drunk dude, and they had most assuredly been intimate. The host walked out of her room completely naked while putting on a robe. When she came out, the dude who punched a hole in the wall was sitting on the living room floor, drinking all the booze in the house to handle the pain from breaking his hand on the wall. The host girl saw this, walked past into the kitchen, then came back out and did a double take at the cowboy hat on the wall. Lifted it up, screamed, "The F," yelled at the dude. I think after that a song came on that they liked, so all the girls danced. Then the guy with the broken hand started dancing on the host girl, and they started going at it in the middle of the living room. He started using his hands on her in the middle of the living room, and I think I just talked with people I knew right next to the two going at it on the floor. I should explain that I was very high and had taken maybe 4 to 5 shots of something, so I was sort of just going with the flow. I think at some point the guy with a broken hand asked for gum because his mouth tasted like her. Story, this is not a funny story, but it fits the bill well enough. I had a friend in elementary and middle school who was honestly a very sweet girl. Unfortunately, the house she came from was filthy, so she and her clothes and all her stuff smelled terribly. I never mentioned it, but plenty of people did because kids can be cruel. Fortunately, I am obnoxious, so people hated me more than her, and that kind of drew some attention from her. I think that is part of why she could relax around me. Anyway, her family was pretty awful, even from the outside, before you knew the details. My mom would never let me spend the night over there. She always insisted this friend come to our house. She later told me it was so she could have at least one night once in a while to be in a quiet, clean house. If only she had known what the rest of the family was like. One time she did let me stay there. I did not even like to think about what I saw. To give you some idea how bad it was, years later the house was demolished rather than renovated. It had earned a nickname in town. I'm not going to write it here because it would identify the family on the off chance the article about it is online somewhere. There were dead animals under furniture, mold all throughout the walls. I did not see those things when I was there, but I did see animal waste everywhere, trash, rotting food left out, and her dad's adult content left openly on the computer. But the really trashy stuff was not just that these people were living like that. It was how they treated their only daughter. I sat through a dinner where her parents discussed which brother they would take when they divorced. Not as a joke, they were actually divorcing. They said in front of me, in front of my friend, that no, the other one could take her. It was like watching a messed up game of hot potato. The day we went to an amusement park for her birthday, her mother got angry over something. I cannot even remember what. Something meaningless. While my friend was in the bathroom, her mother just dumped on her. She sat there ranting to a bunch of year-old girls about some of the foulest things an adult can say about a child. And the other girls agreed, probably because they were scared of this woman. No, my friend could hear her mother. She was only a few feet away. To this day, I cannot imagine how people can be such filth. That family was trashy through and through. I do not know how their daughter was so sweet and sincere. Story, I work at a pawn shop, and I think it was my 2nd or 3rd week there. This guy starts showing up every day with some awful tool, trying to get money for substances. And every day we would tell him we could not get him anything for said awful tool, and he would leave and try again the next day. But this next time he was extremely drunk and had fresh track marks from shooting up. And this time he had some gold. We tested it, and of course it was fake. But then this time he had to wait on his ride. We had some saddles for sale on benches, and he started to lean on them to keep himself upright. At this point, he has on an open button-down shirt and no shirt on underneath, as well as some stained plaid shorts, like really stained. As he is leaning on the bench, his pants start to fall, and I try to look away, but like a car crash, no matter how bad, you gotta look. Within a second, they fell straight down. All I see is a giant mess stain all over his backside and pants. If he would have reacted and been embarrassed, I would not be typing this, but this man had no shame. He said, "Damn, why are you yelling at me? A man's got to do what a man's got to do." Then pulled up his pants and walked straight out into the parking lot to wait on his buddy in plain view of a very busy restaurant. Needless to say, I see a lot of trashy stuff working in a pawn shop, but that takes the cake by far. I think I rambled on. I wonder if anyone will read this far. High story last summer, I was in an Uber from the city center to the outer districts. There were 3 of us, Jenny, Kyle, and myself. We could have taken the subway for far less than the Uber, but Jenny insisted on the ride because she did not want to walk, and she said she would pay for it. So I'm in the front, Jenny and Kyle are in the back making out, and the driver seems oblivious to us. About minutes in, Jenny stops making out with Kyle and says, "I know you have a girlfriend. So like, are you doing this because you're sleazy or because I'm just so pretty? You can't control yourself?" And did a hair flip. He responded, "You are just so pretty." Prettier than her? She asked while my eyes rolled so hard I got migraine. "Yeah," he said back, and they continued making out. Then about 20 minutes after that conversation, I stop hearing the kissing and I start to hear what sounds like sucking after a quick unzip. I froze. I told myself it was not happening. I looked back, and sure enough, he was exposed in her mouth. She was giving him roadhead in a goddamned Uber. I wanted to scream, but I did not want us kicked out of the Uber, so I bit my tongue and hoped she would not hurt him. Eventually, we get to our apartment. The driver did not notice or did not care, and we get out. Jenny sees the dollar Uber bill and loses her mind, saying she is not paying for it, and made Kyle pay for it. Later that night, they hooked up on the main staircase for the apartment. Story: I had a mate who one day told our friend group that a guy we knew from school was back from 6 months away in the Navy. This mate was much more friendly with the guy coming back than the rest of us, and he had suggested we all go on a night out together. We were all about when this happened and lived in a city in the United Kingdom called Newcastle, very much known as a party city. I did not remember too much about what happened up until around 2 in the morning and assumed it was a fairly standard and forgettable night until there was an incident. We were in a pretty grimy bar or nightclub when my mate tapped me on the shoulder and pointed behind me, absolutely aghast at something. I turned to see the Navy guy tearing at the tights of a girl in the middle of the dance floor, eventually ripping them open and proceeding to start using his hands on her. All the while they were both drunkenly rolling their tongues around each other's mouths. What really added to the grotesque scene was they were drunkenly clashing heads so much and so violently, while getting in with each other, that at least one of them had a bust lip. So while they were kissing messily like they were licking a Solaro, blood was being smeared all over them. At this point, I will add that this girl was pretty large and not exactly a looker. Mind you, neither was Navy guy. A good couple dozen people had all stopped what they were doing and were gathered round in a circle, watching on in either utter disgust or morbid curiosity of the perturbing sight. It was about this point that the group decided it might be best if we were to save him from himself and try to leave. This was not the end, unfortunately, as at some point the girl had been with her friends and gotten separated from them. So she elected to follow us out into the street. One of my mates was so drunk, he was not too present during what was going on. So when the girl approached him veiled in a crimson mask, as JR would say, and her lower region exposed to the elements, he did not have the awareness to put up much resistance when she started trying to stick her tongue in his mouth. Navy guy took exception to this and started shouting at my mate for getting in with the girl he had just been using his hands on. The whole while my mate was so drunk, he could only answer the accusations with a vacant stare that said, "What the F is even happening?" The girl had burst into tears at this point, and those of us who were still sober enough to comprehend this unfolding train wreck watched on, all very amused. Once we got things calmed down, we tried to get the girl back to her friends. But since she was too drunk to be of any real help, we left her at one of the drunken people rescue points we have in cities in England and called it night. I have not been on a night out with Navy guys since. Perhaps it is for the best. Story: when I was a teenager, I got into some trouble and was dealt hours of community service. I decided to go to put my time in at a donation store. arranging shelves, and just biding time as my sentence wore. Down the first few shifts, saw some events with theft and public meltdowns. Once I caught a man sniffing panties over in the ladies' aisle. But in general, it was pretty chill a few shifts, and I got to know this girl that was also paying dues. She was pretty cute. And I admittedly flirted with her despite feeling she was a bit trashy attitude was the indicator. One day, we were sitting at a table in the back talking. When she told me she was going to find a way out of her remaining community service, she got up and walked over to the store manager's office, asked if she could step in a chat, and closes the door. Moans become audible. Thumping starts to echo and whoosh. The door comes ajar. I turn around and see her straddled on top of the guy, giving it her best. Apparently, the only cares given were for each other because they paid no mind that I was facing them from a few yards away. I sat there frozen, not knowing if I should leave and give them privacy or have them make the next move. Eventually, the manager rolled the chair around his rickety old desk and slammed the door shut. I finished my Lunchable, and several minutes later, she walked out grinning at me and paid me farewell. The manager walked up to me and asked me how much community service I had remaining, then disappeared into his office. Emerging once more, he handed me a bundle of papers that were signed and dated for the next 6 months. It had time tracking for the rest of my service, and it carried the obvious notion that I had seen nothing. With a few more words exchanged, I walked out of the building and never looked back. Sadly, I never got to thank that girl. Story somehow dragged to the skeeziest bar in town while with a group of friends one night. Woman in her S was there, dancing with a comically useless bandage on her foot. The floor was dirty, and her bandage was soaked in blood, so she was leaving these bloody, muddy splotches of gross all over the floor. Nobody stopped her, and she was clearly at the bar to have a wild night. She was giving that kind of vibe. She eventually finds her way to our group, and she is bleeding heavily from the foot. I mean, it is leaving small pools. We insist she go to the ER, or at least apply more bandage, but she acts like it is no big deal while hitting on a friend of my cousin, who nobody else in the group had met before that night. We asked what happened to her foot, and she says she smashed her foot through her glass coffee table before going out. Yeah, foot through glass table before going to bar. She and my cousin's friend keep talking as we all look to go as soon as possible. She and my cousin's friend keep talking and kind of flirting a few more minutes until he eventually tells us he's going to run her to the local ER. He seems serious and she knows where she is going. We make sure as we do not know the guy. He drove by himself, so he asks us to stay there until he gets back. She is drunk but seems not only ready but excited to go. Leading him out of this awful bar to get her foot stitched up or tetanus shots or amputated. It was bleeding really bad. We kind of felt good about being able to help, but we did ask each other if we were sure this was okay, because we barely knew the guy more than her. However, her foot was messed up and she was % clear in her willingness to go. That was obvious and agreed to the point that she refused an ambulance over the ride for financial reasons. She seemed more ready than the guy, so we relaxed and waited. We stayed for 5 more minutes and decided to leave as the bar was too disgusting and sad. It was a high dive bar, and I am stunned it actually had a liquor license because I have seen parties with higher quality everything. We decide we will call the friend and tell him where we are going as we make our way to the car. Most of us were riding in an SUV with slightly tinted windows. The parking lot was dark, and through the noise around us, we hear moaning. We open the SUV door to see the friend with this woman in the back in such a way where she had her foot in a half over the shoulder and wrapped behind his back type of deal his back, and much of the car is smeared with blood. It looked like the OJ murder scene, blood everywhere. Pools here, splatters there, smears everywhere. It was surreal. The guy had been drinking, but closer to sober than drunk. He knew what he was doing, and she was more than okay with it, by the way. They both screamed to OMG, give us 5 minutes. Shut the door, OMG. Our friend, the owner of the car being covered in a random woman's blood, rightfully freaked out, and the rest of us joined in or stood in shock. It was gross and wrong in every way. Our friend threatened to beat this dude's ass if he wasn't covered in STD foot blood. And soon the police arrived. My cousin, in great shame, is now repeatedly claiming to barely know this guy he brought along, and everyone is standing in the parking lot in some form of dress and attitude. It was bloody mayhem in a literal sense. Police immediately draw guns, thinking the foot-blood-covered man is being attacked by knives or sharks due to literally being covered head to toe. It appears they think the woman is in on the attack, or a part of it, due to being mostly undressed and angry at everything. The rest of us are immediately suspects of a horrible crime. Those not covered in blood did something. The woman is screaming about privacy and such, and is by far and away the most animated. She is likely angry due to being drunk, having lost half her blood, and having their session broken up. She keeps yelling at the police and us that it is not a big deal. I will clean your car. Stop acting like it is a big deal. It is just a car, asshole. All the while, her entire leg is red with blood up to her stomach or lower back. We finally explain what is happening, and an EMT is called. My cousin's friend disappears during the commotion in his car. Yeah, he chose to hook up in the car of a guy he just met and not his own. That being the issue. We know his name and general car description, so he is found pretty quickly and is eventually charged with destruction of property. He had to pay for the car to be re-everything, but my buddy still sold it after. It was a bloodbath. To this day, my cousin will not give a detailed description of how he knew this guy he brought along. It is, I knew him from a while back type of explanations. It was not substances or anything. I made sure to look into that. I think he just met a random dude who he got along with, but did not know and invited him out with us. He is that kind of person, way too trusting. If you shake his hand, he will invite you to his wedding and vouch for you to future employers. The fairy tale ending is that the blood lovers were an item for a few months after. One day, my friend that owned the SUV calls me and says they both were at the court hearing over the damages. The dude did not seem to care about anything, but the woman was still angry about a person not wanting blood or bodily fluids all over their car. He said she's possibly crazy or sober based on that day. Sadly, I did see her at the grocery store about 3 months after that call, and she was loving up on some other guy in line, like really public display of affection. I guess their ship sailed. Story: the trashiest thing I have seen most recently was a drunk woman using a packed men's trough style urinal at VCBW here in Vancouver this past June. VCBW is our annual craft beer week celebration. Every June for a weekend, about brewers from the Pacific Northwest put on a big party at the P&E Fairgrounds here. Literally thousands of people show up to taste different beers, get drunk, and then stand in huge lines for the rows and rows of porta potties they have for washrooms. The women's line is almost always longer and slower than the guys for obvious reasons. So, I'm standing in a line for the urinal area, which is just a big square of trough urinals. I walk around the corner, and the first thing I see is a drunk woman squatting on top of the urinals like a perch bird, relieving herself. There are literally rows and rows of guys all around her, also using the urinals. There are guys in there yelling at this woman, and just as I pull up to a spot, she finishes up and falls down onto the pavement. She then gets up and runs off, and literally everyone is like, "Did you guys just see what was happening?" Jesus. I guess good for her for not conforming to standing in the women's line. But holy shit, what an animal. Story: I was a sophomore in high school, and I was the pool boy for my neighborhood at the time. One morning while I was cleaning the pool, the classy, old meth head seeming lady in our neighborhood was out smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. I made my way around the pool with the vacuum, trying to avoid her at all costs. From a distance, I could see that she was picking at the butt of her bathing suit, sniffing whatever it was, and then flicking it away repeatedly. Nasty enough, right? Well, not for her. As I got closer, I could hear that she was talking dirty with her friend. "I can't wait till you mess around with me later. You better treat me like I'm a grip." I immediately started walking away, but not before I heard a big old sneeze and hack. I turned to see the green mass sailing through the air and land promptly in the pool. I stared bitterly at the floating phlegm as it floundered flagrantly in the water. I told my boss later that day what had happened. At first, he was in sheer disbelief, but moments later he erupted in laughter until tears were dripping off of his cheap sunglasses. Story: most of the people on my block are of the white trash variety, so I could tell a lot of stories. The most recent one involves the people directly across the street. They fight constantly and loudly. So when they started arguing one afternoon, I did not really think too much about it. I put on my headphones and attempted to tune them out like any other day. Their argument went on for like 2 hours and got progressively louder and angrier. I was later told that this whole thing was over a car. The lady down the street called me and told me I should look out my bedroom window. I looked out just in time to see this girl slap her boyfriend. Then the drunk old man who lives in that house came running yelling at them to shut up. Cops were called and more yelling ensued after they left. I think the cops came down here about 3 separate times that evening. Story when I was in college. High school age is college here in the United Kingdom. We had a pond, very dirty, man-made thing. But one day, one of the better skaters in our group decided he could make some money by jumping the thing. So we did a sort of Kickstarter before the internet was even a thing and raised about pounds in loose change for him to jump the pond successfully. I may add much fun was had, however. It appeared to scrawny, punkish guys who could not skate had taken wind of this idea devoid of such a skill. They spent the next few weeks or months doing regular stunts such as licking centimeters of the most disgusting carpet imaginable for a 4 pounds bounty, drinking each other's urine for 6 pounds and 2 loose cigarettes, doing the helicopter in class for 9 pounds, and the like. One of them ended up carrying this on as a profession after he got kicked out for failing to go to classes rather than for sticking a rose in his private parts or taking a chili pepper anally on the college quad. I ran into him in a pub and bought him a drink a couple of years ago. The poor guy is scared the government is after him due to his having attended a few parties as a paid guest of wealthy or important straight men years ago. Story one late evening before returning home, I asked a waiter of a closing restaurant if I could make quick use of the men's room before leaving as it was a long way home. While I was approaching the bathroom, I could hear moaning coming from the women's room. For a moment, I just thought of turning around and holding it in, but there was a sense of urgency, so I just tried to do my business as fast as possible. While I was there, the moaning started to intensify, and I quickly tried to wrap things up. Alas, before I could leave, the noise promptly came to a stop, and as I was making my way out, this guy comes rushing around the corner with himself still exposed, clearly in the middle of something. I guess since he figured he was all alone, it would be more efficient to keep himself out to make the short trip from one bathroom to another. We both knew what transpired, and I did not bother lifting my stare and avoided eye contact after my unfortunate glance at what was happening. I could tell from the clothes, though, that it was the boss who, presumably, was having an affair with one of his waitresses. I used to like that place. They have some decent beer at affordable prices, but never returned since then. Story. Had a childhood friend come to stay with my wife and I at our house. He came to visit from Rochester with his newborn son. He had gotten involved with a girl who had a rough background. I wish I was making that part up, but her biological mother used substances with her in the womb. But I digress. He stayed with us for about a week and told us things were not working so hot with them. And we kindly offered our place so he could get away from her and start over and get on his feet. Kind of find out they figured whatever out. And they were looking to move back to town, but still needed somewhere to stay for a bit. This was not the original plan, but they offered to pay us rent and help pay towards the utilities. This was in November when they moved in and lasted until February. They would say they applied for jobs, but literally could not find a single one the whole time they stayed with us. They had food stamps, and instead of buying healthy food for themselves and their 6-month-old, they would go to the -11 2 streets over and buy the garbage food they sell there. The mother would constantly mess with my mental state, often telling me my elderly pet rat will die soon. She would also scream at the baby to shut up. They ignored him crying so that the dad could play PlayStation and mom could do whatever. In short, things got old very quickly, and my wife and I finally decided we did not care anymore and gave them a week to get out. They had 1 week to get all their stuff out from my upstairs bedroom and out of my house. They did not. I did not think they actually believed we would kick them out. So off to the homeless shelter they go, upon which they decided to start playing tough, stating that they had rights and this and that. To which I responded that if they wanted to take me to court, they could do so, but I could hire better representation and would make sure the courts took their child. This caused them to calm down and stop trying to intimidate my wife. The unfortunate task of clearing their room out fell on my wife and her best friend, as that particular week work was killer for me. Upon clearing out the room, they found months-old food containers, pills scattered around where the newborn could reach them. They also discovered a bloody tampon on the floor, along with 7 formula cans full of human urine, with no lids. By far the most trashy bulge I have seen. Needless to say, I cut these 2 people out of my life. My wife and I just got hitched at the end of June, and the guy had the audacity to send me a message on Facebook congratulating me, which I promptly deleted and blocked him. Story: I was once out at a work lunch with 2 coworkers and our CEO. At the time, it was a small, tight-knit company, so the lunch was not anything special. We were in a downtown venue area grabbing a few burgers. The walk back is usually through the main downtown 3-way intersection. My coworker was going on about some work-related thing. I was not paying too much attention to the matter, instead more focused on the traffic and looking both ways before crossing the street. On the other side of the street, there is an alleyway we have to pass through. The walls are old brick, something you would often see in a historic downtown area. And there are bushes that are old and ratty, which line the left wall. They're not taken care of. This alleyway is never typically pleasant. Cigarette butts, old Irish rose bottles everywhere. As we get to the other side of the street, I feel an arm bump into my stomach. I look down, and my CEO has his arms blocking us from walking any further. I look up at him, and he is staring straight ahead. I join the symphony of awe, the 4 of us employees standing there. Lo and behold, there is a homeless woman bent over, standing semi-sideways to us. She is looking pretty ragged, stumbling around a bit. I have no problem with homeless people, but drunk ones are a different story. Now she is not entirely bent over. She is about a degree's lean over, mostly standing. She also has her pants down to just above her knees. All of a sudden, she just starts peeing. All that pee is going nowhere, but right back in her pants. It must have been at least seconds before we did anything. Halfway through, you could see the puddle coming from underneath her pants, and the stench was unbearable. My CEO turned a bit green in the face after about seconds into it. She hikes up her britches and walks off. We took the long way back. Story: I lived in Germany in the military for 4 years. My roommate was this 6'7" tall black guy. If you do not know, German girls love American black dudes. And this guy was getting attention, practically tossed at him everywhere we went. He was a cool dude, and we got along really well. But he was a little socially awkward, and you could tell he did not chew. I had know what to do with the new attention. At Oktoberfest in Munich, this Turkish girl ran up to us with an I Heart New York t-shirt and practically threw herself on my buddy. We had a third friend who was a German national and translated her words to him as, "I have to prove I'm a bigger wild girl. Wild girl must be paid. We'll do intimate stuff for looks around a bag of roasted peanuts." So, I being the bro, I pick up this pack of peanuts, pay for them, and the 5 of us go behind the potties behind the tent, where she does her thing while kneeling in about 3 inches of mud and errant puddles. Her friend and I ate the entire bag of peanuts like it was popcorn at a strange theater. Halfway through, she gags and says something to my friend, who translated it as her asking her friend if she won the bet because it tastes awful. I will never forget standing in the mud sharing these peanuts with her friend, both of us watching with detached curiosity, as the most sad moment of all time limped to its finish. Later on, when we were getting on the train back to base, we saw her jump on with 2 other dudes and go to the back of the car, where she hooked up with one and helped the other. Same sad friend, watching glassy-eyed. I told my friend he might as well have stuck himself in a sewer. We called him Sewer Guy from then on. If you read this, I miss you, Sewer Guy. You were a cool dude. I have a third story about this Turkish chick when I ran into her again a few months later, but that is for another thread. Story: after a professional night of crazy drinking at our old local, a maid and I left the pub and headed towards home. A few doors down from the pub, we noticed a body lying in front of a house. In our confused state, we decided to investigate and assist the poor man, who was clearly in a progressed state of drunkenness. We managed to sit him up, whereupon he assured us it was his house and had been drinking all day because his football team played earlier and lost. But he was all right. Convinced he was okay enough to get in the house, We helped him up to the door and started again on our way. Then we heard a loud bang as he fell into his front door head first. He then proceeded to pull himself out and pee loudly and fervently all over his front door, balancing against the door by his forehead. We watched agape his own door. After some time he finished, he turned and gave us a knowing smirk as he inserted his key and waved his hand at the door handle to open the door before falling over again in his own puddle. He let out a fanciful and mournful groan. We continued walking away. Story in college, my sister wants to come and visit. She did not tell me she was bringing her friend and her boyfriend Kino. I am outside waiting for my sister when I see the car pull up, and Kino walks out and screams, freaking which, I am done with you, and insults her looks, intelligence, and overall ability. This is the first time I have seen this guy. He storms off in a city he has never been to before. I hang out with my sister and her friend and forget about him. My sister goes out to a local bar with her friend while I study in my dorm room. And who happens to darken my doorway? Kino. He spent the next 2 hours showing me pictures of him, with random girls, telling me about his time in jail and how he almost hurt a guy in a bar fight. I'm frantically texting my sister to no avail. She finally comes home, and this dude starts screaming again. He finally locks himself in my bathroom and refuses to come out even when the RA shows up. Total freaking nightmare. Story Music Festival in the UK. My friends and I made a little circle pitch of tents, with a clearing in the middle for sitting and drinking. I think it was about AM when I heard the noises and woke up. It was a sound similar to a warthog being stuck. My friends and I were all shouting at each other from inside our tents, asking what the F that noise is. I decided to be brave and take a quick look. So unzipping the front of the tent, I am greeted to, well, a very clear view, basically into a private area. Turns out the crazy guy of the group, yeah, he is a verified crazy, had pulled some woman at the festival, and she was bent over in front of my tent with his fingers ramming inside every so often, his erect man missile pointing directly at me. I swiftly zipped the tent back up and crawled to the storage area of my tent and proceeded to crack a bottle of whiskey to try and forget the ordeal whilst they continued to pleasure each other in the middle of our circle of tents. Further into the festival, Crazy Guy and Trash Lady decided it is a good idea to hook up in the middle of a Black Dahlia murder mosh pit. I believe there is still videos on YouTube of him being dragged into a wall of death still with his trousers around his ankles. Story, I work at a bar in a college town, so we tend to see some pretty interesting stuff. Flashing, lack of underwear, fights, substances, shootings, etc. You name it, I have probably seen it. What takes the cake happened just a couple of weeks ago. Slow night, just me and my bar manager Jake are closing by ourselves. We have got a classic third wheel situation happening with a guy and girl both housed. We had cut them off about minutes prior and were feeding them water and their female friend as the watchdog. Female friend proceeds to get up off her bar stool to use the restroom, and within second the other two are all over each other. Pretty normal behavior, all things considered. Jake and I start to close up, wiping off the bar tops, cleaning the wells, what have you. This is where things get interesting trashy. As Jake walks around the bar to start stacking the stools, he makes it about 5 feet or so from the other two, stops, approaches, and starts slowly helping them get their esh together. Again, pretty normal. Well, what I could not see from behind the bar was what was really going on. Jake comes back around the bar and proceeds to tell me that when he got close enough, he could see that the girl had her underwear around her ankles, and the guy was drunkenly trying to use his semi-hard-on to its full potential. As he is telling me this, the third wheel walks back from the bar and escorts them both out. We died laughing, and it has become a pretty great story to add to the rest of the things we have seen. Story used to be a lifeguard at a really trashy water park. The hot tub was a known place for people to pull some gross shays. To put into context, the hot tub was shaped like a big donut. So there was an island in the middle that had seats along every edge. So one day I'm sitting there on my bucket. No, seriously, we sat on buckets, and I see these people with their backs to me sitting on the island. Normally we walk around every so often to make sure the blind spots are clear. When I do this, I am walking around the edge, and as I get to the point that I am nearly facing the couple, I see the girl's hand down this guy's pants, furiously giving him a nice old-fashioned. They had absolutely zero idea that I was now right in front of them in full sight of this hot tub rub job. I swear, I have never blown my whistle harder in my life. I followed that up with a quite audible, "Ma'am, could you please remove your hand from that guy's pants and exit the hot tub?" The sad part about it was that this was not the grossest thing I had ever seen while working there. It definitely was the trashiest, though. Story: I was at a fish show parking lot in North Carolina when a wook asked if he could borrow some sunscreen for his kid. The kid was young, and the parent was obviously messed up, so I obliged. As he was putting sunscreen on the kid, he started telling a story about how he broke the kid out of state custody after he was taken from his mom, and then he wrecked his car and lost an ounce of Molly. Meanwhile, as he was putting sunscreen on the kid's belly, he was moaning about how his stomach hurt, which the wook attributed to the crash. He then proceeded to take and write his name and phone number in large letters across the kid's back and shoulders in the likely event that the parent got too messed up and lost the kid. Me and my now wife were pretty drunk at the time, so we just took our sunscreen back and quickly ditched this guy. In hindsight, I should have called CPS right then and there. Story: trashiest thing I have ever seen was the time I was almost forced into doing coke and then watched a man break a pumpkin over someone's head. First off, this happened in the fall, close to Halloween a couple years ago. I worked for an oil and gas company in Denver, a division that specifically sold drill bits. Well, we had an important client who was a rig manager in North Dakota, and we would easily sell him $1 million in drill bits a month when he had enough rigs. So he was an important customer you made happy. So several of us took him and his friends out, go-karting for the afternoon, had pizza, drank beer after racing, and had fun. I thought he was a cool guy. I thought, well, after that, we all agreed to go back to our places and get changed, and then out to some bar cross from Coors Field. So I went home and took a shower and headed over. We drank and played cornhole for several hours. This guy's wife and his wife's girlfriend and their guy friend were super drunk and chatty. They eventually disappeared, and we were getting ready to leave. While this guy from North Dakota is trashed, and we're trying to pay our tab, which was several $100s in booze, and saying that now, let's go to his apartment and do some coke with him. We both said no, and he loses his S, George, and basically said if we did not go back to his apartment and do coke with him and his friends, he will never buy a drill bit from us again on his rigs. Basically saying if we do not do coke, we will lose $1 million a year in revenue. I'm trying to get out of this because I'm not doing coca. Well, the heavens were shining down on me that night. And right when he is about to get even more pissed, we start hearing yelling and screaming and see his wife and girlfriend and the other guy are all being thrown out of this bar. I ask what is happening, and they basically say they were doing coke in the bathrooms and were being kicked out. The guy runs after his wife, who is fighting the security guards and being escorted out. And my friend and I said we would stay behind and meet him outside later since we were still paying the tab. After we paid, we left on the other side and dodged the coke man. And then we were texted by some other clients who were from Alaska. And these were actual rig hands. So we meet them at a super trashy bar since we got out of almost doing coke and drink pitcher after pitcher of steepest cores. There was a hot girl there with her boyfriend. And these 5 guys are eyeing the girlfriend and saying how hot she is and how her boyfriend is a little bitch and how they should all beat his ass because she deserves a real man. Again, I am perplexed by what I am witnessing. Next thing I know, this guy's breaking a damn pumpkin that was in the bar for decoration over the boyfriend's head as these 5 guys pummeled the poor girl's boyfriend because she was too hot for him. During the scuffle, all the bodies crashed, pulling them all apart. And I called it quits. I had been drinking since the morning, and it was around AM now, and took a taxi home, still processing all that had happened on this eventful Friday. But it was the trashiest day I had ever experienced. Being blackmailed into doing coke or lose literal millions, and then other drunk Alaskan rig workers breaking pumpkins on a poor guy's head. Story: I work as a security officer in a large U.S. casino, so I deal with trash on duty all the time. It never phases me, because even the classiest of people turn into trash with a few drinks. My best trashy story from these experiences actually comes from when I had just finished working an hour shift. Some coworkers and I had just finished working and were walking along the back of the casino to the parking garage to go home. It was about AM meaning that graveyard had taken over and two things were happening: arrests and vomit. As we were walking, I note a blonde girl sitting in a large puddle of her own vomit, being consoled by her boyfriend. We are minding our own business, having our own conversation, when the girl hawks a huge barfy loogie right onto my leg. I look down at her and she drunkenly shouts, "F you." I turn around and ask her why she did that. And she mumbles, "You've judged me." Her boyfriend starts telling me to mind my own business and to F off, to which I inform her that she has committed a crime and that if the two want to cop an attitude, then I will happily have a uniformed officer come to arrest her. She immediately starts sobbing, saying, "You do not know my story. My mom has a boyfriend and is leaving my dad." To this day, I do not really understand why that would work as an explanation for spitting on me, but whatever. Story working security outside on Halloween once. It is degrees Fahrenheit, freezing. A chick comes by and only body paint, asking to use the restroom or go in and get warm. I turn her away because that was my entire job that night. She squats down right in front of me and lets loose. Pee everywhere. Nothing to wipe with. So it just drips down her leg when she stands up. An hour later, she is back to ask the same thing. I managed to chase her off a ways this time, where she simply staggers over and leans against a wall, squats down, and does it again. As is a random guy walking up next to her, just pulls himself out and pees on the wall next to her, where she is peeing all over his feet, and he is splashing the wall all over her. He is not even done before she just reaches up and starts messing with him, his pee now going everywhere, and both of them too drunk to realize what is happening in the slightest. They definitely did not know each other from the interaction they had after that, but happy to just pee all over each other with a random moment. Her body paint was not waterproof either, so when she walked by later, it was obvious how bad she had been sprayed. Oh, and remember it was degrees Fahrenheit? Yeah, frozen pee all in her hair and down her leg. I never worked security on Halloween again. I did not get paid enough to deal with all the other bulge that night either. But Body Paint Pisser Girl was just the most WTF moment of my time as security. Story when I was around years old. I went to sleep over at a friend's house. I got there on a Friday after school. He let me in and told me we should go out into their yard so I could say hi to his mother. I saw she was swimming, so we walked toward the pool only to discover she was swimming without a top. Not the worst thing, but she was expecting her son's friend over. Later that evening, bedtime was approaching. The mother made us hot chocolate, and I discovered my friend had pills to help him sleep well. He took one, and the mother asked if I wanted one. I was a kid who never wanted to be left out, so I accepted the offer, meaning she gave a sleeping tablet to someone else's child without knowing if I could be allergic or anything. We got in bed, sharing a mattress on the floor, and fell asleep quickly. Then in the early hours of the morning, I woke up and discovered my friend was no longer on the mattress. I thought this was great and rolled onto my back to stretch out, only to roll right into a wet patch. Turns out he had wet the bed. The mother got him bathed, changed, and into his actual bed and left me on the soil mattress for the night. Lower on my list of the most chaotic things I have witnessed, but the most chaotic thing I have personally been a part of.